going on, everyone? Episode 86 of VYPE Block Talk Live. I'm your host, Whack, and joining alongside with me today is Jackson, as almost always. Jackson, how you doing, man?
Doing good. It was a busy weekend. I had family Christmas, but it was also just Christmas all around. I mean, we had Texas high school football state championship weekend. Always fun to kind of sit down, watch those games play out, root for whoever, maybe the jersey combination you like, the teams you actually know about, whatever it is. Always watching Texas high school championship weekend during that time.
That wasn't on my kind of to talk about list, but let's start there then, because that gives me a good idea. What was for in your opinion? What was the jersey combo of the week for you?
I really like South Oak Cliffs jerseys they had out. I feel like all the Dallas ISD schools had really good uniform combinations, but South Oak Cliffs, I always like theirs with the gold. And I believe they have Mecca in cursive on their helmets, so I really like those. I like the Duncanville All Blacks. I got to see them when they played the Woodlands. Those were really clean. And then, of course, North Shore's new Nike jerseys. A lot of people might not like them because they're a little plain Jane, but that's just kind of how North Shore likes it. They like it to look uniform, look unity. So I really like their uniforms. But if I had to pick another one, I'd probably say I always like Brock's. The blue and yellow just always goes well together. I like Brock's jerseys as well.
Yeah, I think a couple for me. I think I like Gunners jerseys. I like their combo. China Springs as well. You got, especially if I'm not a North Carolina fan, but you got that baby blue, which I know a lot of people like to rock. I also like Bernie's. I like that purple. Done right, purple can look good on a jersey, and I think Bernie does it right. And then of course, I agree. Duncanville's last year they did the whiteout, or last year they did the whiteout. This year they did the blackout, and they've killed it both times. So. I would agree with you. I think Duncanville probably wins it for me for the whole week. So we're going to cover today. Obviously, we're going to cover all. We're going to go, walk through all 12 games. Some we'll talk about more than others. A lot of them. Let's be fair, they were kind of snooze fests for the most part. That happens sometimes. That's just the way it is. But there were a couple of good games, so we'll talk about those. But before we get into the games, I want to talk about state as a whole because I think there were a couple of intriguing kind of stories there. So I'm going to give you the option of what you want to talk about first. So, you pick, and then I'll kind of break it down and before we give our take. So do you want to talk about stadium location first, or do you want to talk about regional dominance first? Which one do you want to talk about first?
Yeah, let's talk about stadium first.
Yeah, great. This one happened fairly early into the week, and I think the conversation kind of carried over, as the week went on, especially with that regional dominance that we'll talk about in the second segment. And so after Refugio lost, their head coach kind of was like, "Hey, I don't like that we always have to play at AT&T Stadium. It throws us off. It's not fair that some teams have to travel so far, this and that." I have my opinion on this, but I want to hear your opinion on this. And I think we've kind of briefly touched on stadium location in the past, but do you think that the state should always be at AT&T Stadium? What's your take on that? There's some talk of should 1A and 2A maybe play a different location, and 3A through 6A play somewhere else? What's your whole take on kind of that discussion that was had this past week?
I wouldn't mind. Like the coach from Inferior said, I think sometimes it does affect a lot of these schools and kind of these urban, not the big cities. I mean, even for teams down from Houston or San Antonio and Austin, it's still a drive to get there. You're still getting a hotel most likely that Friday night and staying the night versus these Dallas schools. They just hop on a bus on that day and just head there in the morning. So I do agree. Maybe the stadium location isn't always the best, but I feel like Jerry's World is such an experience. It's a thing for the entire community, the team, just getting to play in Dallas Cowboy Stadium. I mean, how many teams actually get to say that they get to do that other than the teams that make it to state? I think that's what makes it so great. I think that in the future we might see it hop around to the three different major cities, but I mean, I think that for the most part, having it at Dallas Cowboy Stadium is it's a part of that Texas high school football state championship. I don't think it gets any better than that. I think that a lot of people would agree with that, but I do agree with some things about Refugio. I mean, I know he mentioned that they only got to have 2 practices that week versus the other opponent, I believe, is Holly, correct, Josh?
Correct.
Holly got to have 3 practices because they were closer to the stadium. So I feel like it really just depends on how the UIL wants to handle it. But I think as a whole, I think everyone likes that it's at Jerry's World because you get to go experience that atmosphere. And I mean, you look at the 6A D1 matchup to end everything, the finale of the state championship weekend. I mean, there are more people at that game than there probably are going to be a lot of bowl games this year in college. So I'm mixed feelings about it, but I personally think Jerry's World is a great spot for it.
Yeah, first to the notion that 1A, 2A, maybe 3A should play somewhere else, and have the bigger schools play at a different. No, I think having all 12 games at the same location is fair because it's like why punish a school just because they're smaller, right? I mean, you should the 1As should have just as much of an experience as the 6As. Plus, I don't think UIL would ever do that anyways, just because then you're splitting up their personnel at different locations, especially if it's on the same during the same day. So I don't think that's ever going to happen. As far I like you brought the argument that he only got 2 practices. Got to put that on the coach, right? I mean, this is a guy that's been to I think 7 or 8 state championships now, and you're telling me you can't have it planned out where you still get your 3 practices in. That's a little. I put that one more on the coach than I do anything else. I mean, you know what day your state championship's going to be on from preseason. I mean, next year they know they're playing on a Thursday, right? Are playing their D. I'm sorry, they are D2. No, they're D1. Yeah, so they're playing on a Thursday next year. They know that. So, oh no, they're playing on. Yeah, yeah. No, they're playing on a Wednesday next year. I'm sorry, looking at my schedule here all wrong. So they know next year they're playing day one. So it's like that's stuff you got to think of, especially if you think you're going to have championship aspirations. But I think the main point is, when you try to make the argument, you have something you want to say on that? I got no.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
go for
was.
it. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I
I'm
was
sorry.
just gonna add. Okay, I was just gonna add. I totally agree with you about the coach. I think that I was thinking that when I saw the interview on Twitter, I was like, well, why wouldn't you maybe practice on a Sunday then, or get ahead of a practice, like at least do what you would normally do on a Monday on a Sunday, because typically most schools on a Monday, you're doing a workout, you're kind of prepping your game plan for the week, watching film. So I feel like it's definitely what you were saying in regards to the practice part of it. That was just something I didn't necessarily agree with what he said, but I just wanted to bring that up as a point to anyone who didn't see that video. That's kind of the point he was trying to make with it, uh, the distance.
Yeah, and I think the final point on that, and this is what's so hard for UIL is when you really look at, and I think it was even Matt Stepp that might have tweeted this out or retweeted or something along those lines that when you take all 1,500 UIL schools and find the exact center location of all those schools, it is just I think just like west of DFW. So in reality, it really is the center. It's hard to say let's move it around, but here's the thing, and again, this is hard for UIL to do because they can't wait to know who's in the state championship to lock in a state championship venue. They have to do it sooner rather than later, right? They have to do it. They have to do it years in advance. They can't just wait around and then do the venue. You have to consider the teams in the Panhandle, the teams in El Paso. Do they rarely make state championship games? Yes. But if they were to ever make it, and let's say it's in Houston, now you're talking about a team driving basically all the way across the state to go play for a state championship. Whereas for the most part, most teams are driving, I think it's no more than 300 miles. So I think that's where the thing comes in is that UAL has to consider those teams. Yes, they don't historically make it to Jerry World or make it to the UAL State Football Championships, but you have to keep them in account because what happens if for one year they do and you're having that game in Houston? That's a long, long drive. That's a lot longer than a lot of these teams are driving there and back currently for AT&T Stadium. So it's one of those things where I don't think people maybe take that into account. They're only looking at the teams that are currently playing and not all the teams in the state going in week one. So I think with that being said, I think Jerry World is the perfect thing. I think personally for me too. If you're going to play it somewhere else, it needs to have a dome. So you're looking at Jerry World, you're looking at Alamo Dome, you're looking at NRG because you don't want bad weather to ruin a state championship game. So I think you have to have a dome. So you go take out DKR, and stuff like that. So I think that's my final thought on that. Jackson, any final thoughts before we move on to kind of number 2 on our radar? Any final thoughts? All right, then. Well, let's move on then to kind of topic number 2 from state championship, and that's the dominance of regions 1 and 2. And I think region 2 in particular, I think ended up winning 7 or 8 of the state. Oh, excuse me, state championships. Franklin was the only team in region 3 or 4 that won state this year. All the other teams came from either region 1 or 2. Jackson, were you surprised about this dominance that happened in those 2 regions on the left side of the bracket, basically?
I mean, not necessarily because how it is split up. I mean, Region One and Two. I'll use 6A as the example for Region One and Two. I mean, 6A, you have Dallas is split up basically. So you had Duncanville on one side, and then the other side you had the Allens, the Prospers, those schools up on Region One. And so Duncanville really only had to play. They played 2 Houston area teams in the 3rd and 4th round, and then they met up with another Dallas school. So I'm not shocked that those teams succeeded. Um, I am more surprised that it's that big of a margin of dominance. Maybe this is something UIL looks at for when you look at realignment and maybe redoing how the regions look. But I mean, Dallas schools did their thing this year, especially, and everyone in Region 1s and 2 across the board just really did their thing, except for Franklin, who won in Region 3.
Yeah, I mean I mean sometimes I think that's a little skewed. I think you do see a lot of teams, especially in the 1A through 3A, sometimes from Region 1 or 2, kind of dominant like that. I was surprised Houston kind of got blanked there. I mean, when you look at Port Neches Groves, when you look at North Shore, you thought maybe one of them would end up winning, but that wasn't the case. Then of course, you had some upsets in the semifinals. So Katy didn't get to play DeSoto. Would that game have been different if it was DeSoto Katy? So some things we'll just never know. But yeah, definitely. I wouldn't say exciting, but it's good. It's good stuff because last year you did have some dominance on the. Not maybe as dominant, but you had Region 3 and Region 4 kind of showing out a little bit. And this year it was regions 1 and 2 just really dominating. So I don't think it's a big huge story. Just really an interesting fact to really look into. Just to see and be like, wow, region 1 and 2 really just stood out as far as teams goes this year. Any thoughts before we move on and talk about some of these games, Jackson?
I mean, I my only thought, and this is just something I've always been curious about, that Region 2 is always interesting when it comes to Dallas and Houston because for the most part, it's a Dallas region, but then you have 4 teams from Houston that have to go through that region with all these other Dallas schools, which makes it there's tons of travel in Region 2. So I always get confused on that and why they split it up like that. But that's kind of just my 2 cents on that. I would like to see that change. Maybe have those 4 Houston teams move into the Region 3 side, where it's mainly Houston.
Yeah, and I think the short answer to that is just the number of schools, especially in that 6A. So they don't have as many schools maybe to put in, and then on top of that, they try to factor in and be fair as much as they can to travel. UIL doesn't have an easy job sometimes, especially when you want to talk about UIL having a fun job, fun quote unquote. You go look at the 4A schools and their locations and how they have to district them every year. Like it's not an easy job, and I don't their job is not easy. I'll just say that. Let's move on to some of these games. Let's go ahead and just run through some of these scores real quick. Now we'll start at 1A. Division 2, we'll start where it all started. Benjamin gets past Lorraine 68-20. Got that run rule on them early in the 3rd quarter, I believe it was. And then 1A D1, Westbrook goes, I believe it was back to back. They beat Abbott 69-24. Also run rule early in the fourth quarter. I believe that one was. And then the final game on that Wednesday to start off, Albany gets past Mart 41-21. I know a lot of people had Mart winning that one, undefeated coming into that game, and Albany gets the win. I think that head coach had been there for quite a while and finally got his state championship game. Jackson, real quick, just run it down Wednesday. I don't know if you watched any games, but what were your take on the Wednesday action of it all?
Yeah, I remember we talked about Benjamin. I believe I picked Benjamin to win that game, but I was seeing a crazy stat. I'd have to double check this, but I was scrolling through Twitter. Apparently, Benjamin, from what I could see, was basically scoring every other play. They only had really 16 plays that they really scored on, and they were able to put up 66 or 68 points. I think is what you said, Josh. So.
Correct.
That one was shocking to me. I always love watching six-man football because it's a little different, but just you always have high-scoring games. Looking at those brackets for six-man 1A and seeing scores get up of 100 points, that's pretty crazy. So always kind of like checking in on those games. So those were a couple of games I was looking at on Wednesday.
Yeah, it's always fun to watch those games. I mean, you just need that one good athlete that's going to be able to outrun everyone. That tends to happen quite a bit in the six man level. So move on to Thursday in the first game. Of course, we mentioned it kind of previously. Holly beats Refugio 54-28. I think that was a game I don't think a lot of us were expecting to go that way. Maybe not. And when I say that, maybe not the drubbing that Holly put on him. That was an absolute just dominant performance by Holly. I don't think an extra day of practice would have helped. So I'm just going to say that. Then we move on to class 3A. And the first game there, Gunter and Poth. Of course, Poth was the team I picked to win just from the simple fact that I've had a lot of family go through that school. So it was more of a heart pick, and Gunter just took it to him 42-7. That 7 came really basically at the end of the game for Poth. So, proud of the Pirates for getting that far, but Gunner definitely the better team there. And then in the nightcap, the first close game of the tournament came on Thursday night. Brock and Franklin, a back and forth game that came on a game-winning field goal by Franklin. I mean, this game had it all. I don't know if you watched this game, Jackson. Give me a head. So you did. I mean, Franklin was not the better team on offense in that game. Brock was constantly moving, but then Franklin got that key strip when Brock was moving downfield. I think they were at the Franklin like 30 something, and they just completed a pass to get to that. And the wide receiver is still trying to run. And number 10 for Franklin, I forget his name at the top of my head, just strips it and runs it all the way back for a touchdown. I mean, Jackson, what was your take on that game? I thought it was just a great game in general, but I mean, man, you got to feel sorry for Brock because he felt like they had the better kind of offensive scheme. It felt like, and I felt like their defense had really shut down Franklin's, kind of slot T for the most part.
Yeah, and you really saw how much one play in a state game can really change the momentum. That changed it for Franklin for sure, getting that strip for the touchdown. But then, I mean, late in the game, they were able to just kind of drive down the field, and they were making the right play. Their quarterback, who's also their kicker, nails that last-second field goal to get the win. The thing that I really liked about it afterwards, and this says a lot about Texas high school football, is you had the Brock coach get both teams together at the end of the game, and they just kind of enjoyed the moment together. Yeah, there's wins, there's losses, and basically you could hear the coach kind of talking about it. Someone's got to lose, someone's got to win. It was y'all's win today, and just kind of talking to those kids, having a little prayer after the game, and it was just kind of something cool to see. You don't really get to see a lot of that maybe on TV all the time, but that's what Texas high school football is all about.
Yeah, that was definitely a great moment to see, especially to close out the second night of UNL State. And we moved on to Friday. This is where we get into the 4A through 6A realm. Game number 1, Carthage taking on Wimberley. And this game, it seemed like it could have maybe gone, maybe I don't want to say a different way because I think Carthage is that good, but I think Wimberley could have put up some points. The final score on this one, by the way, folks, 42-0. But I feel like there was a couple of plays where it's just like if a ball bounces one way or another or whatever, maybe Wimberley puts up a little bit more of a fight. I mean, they caused Carthage to fumble in their opening possession, can't do anything with it. They get down into Carthage territory a handful of times. I think even the red zone turn it over. So just Carthage becoming going back to their dominant performance. I think the head coach there is now what 9 for 9 when playing at AT&T Stadium. You just can't beat him when he gets there. He's won more state championships than he's lost playoff games as a coach at Carthage. Just unbelievable. Only lost 7 playoff games, won 9 state championship. I mean, just crazy. Just talk to me about the dominance of Carthage, Jackson.
Yeah, and I was kind of watching that game in and out as I had brother's graduation on that Friday. But I really liked how Carthage was playing, and they were just the better team out there. I mean, um, Wimberley did their best, and they were close to potentially putting some points on the board there late in the game, but they threw an interception, which gave Carthage the ball back. So Carthage was just dominant overall, and I mean, you just talked about it. That's a program with a coach that knows how to win when it comes to playoff time. So congrats to Carthage and coach on his night.
And then we move to the game that might have been the most heartbreaking, as probably out of all the games, but especially I know for me, kind of rooting for him a little bit on the side. The middle game of that day, Bernie and China Springs. China Springs was 24-21 on a game-winning field goal. But in this one, Bernie was up 21-0, and then China Springs, sorry, no S. They score right before halftime, so they go 21-7 into half, and then it's all China Spring in the second half. Bernie has a couple of turnovers and stuff like that in the second half, I believe, and just I think I think and this is what you kind of hate is if I'm remembering the game correctly, Bernie was driving a little bit and they pick up a first down, but I think it gets called back because of a ineligible man downfield. And right call, but you hate to see it called there in such a tight game. Then they end up having to punt, and then China Spring goes down and kicks that field goal. What a game! I think it's my this one, and then the very last game of the tournament, if you will, might have been the two best games. And then you can say Franklin and Brock as well. But Jackson, what is your take on this game?
Yeah, I was once again. This is another game I was kind of in and out of, like checking on Twitter for it. But I saw Bernie was up 21 nothing, and I said, well, looks like San Antonio, Austin area is getting the state champ. And then next thing I know, I'm checking Twitter after dinner, and I see that China Spring wins on a game-winning field goal. So it's kind of crazy how a game can change, especially like you were saying with this, how I said earlier, with the slightest plays, penalties, whatever it may be. That's all you need for a momentum swing, and getting that illegal lineman downfield is a very unfortunate penalty, especially in the circumstances where it happened. But that's part of the game, and yeah, I mean, it's another exciting game. I believe that was top three for me overall on the weekend.
Yeah, and it was indeed a illegal man downfield. It just looked. Hate to see it, but I mean, yeah, that one really set them back. Like I said, they had just picked up a first down. It was a 26-yard gain on that one, so huge turn. That was a huge play for me that really turned the game at the very end there. And we moved to the nightcap, and of course, we talked about this game earlier. Dallas South Oak Cliff defeats Port Neches Groves 34-24. This one, I think it was the tale of two halves. I felt like Port Neches Groves had the kind of had the edge early on there, and then it was, if you ask me, it was that I think that safety really turned around the game. It was the punt that went over the head for Port Neches Groves. He bats it out of the end zone. I think that really turned the momentum in that game. And then I think after that it was just South Oak Cliff just doing what they do all year. They're a physical team. They got a great defense, so they just wore you down on defense and just waited for their opportunities on offense for them to score, and that's what they did. Jackson, what's your take on this game?
Yeah, I was really rooting for P&G in this game, but South Oak Cliff. I mean, we said it at the beginning of the year. They had the teams go back to back, and we had some questions kind of during the midseason when they were kind of 0-4 at the time, or 0-3, and they really just picked it up. They switched out the kind of run game. They added Javen Thomas to that run game. He was able to do things in the state game, and then also getting back Wildman Collie as at receiver. He made a ton of plays, or he made a really big catch that I saw in that first half. So South Oak Cliff was just the more dominant team once they came out in the second. But don't hang your hats if you're P&G with first-time head coach, Coach Joseph, who is Gary Joseph's son, Katie, legendary coach. So though congratulations to South Oak Cliff on the win, but if you're P&G, you guys are going to be back there pretty soon if I had to bet on it.
Yeah, I think this is something we talked about. I think we talked about it last week. Is like you can't look at the number of losses on a team's schedule because sometimes the case for South Oak Cliff, the case for Brock, even though they didn't win at all, Brock is that they're playing some tough teams to start. In pre-district because at the end of the day, it means nothing, right? It's not going to do anything to affect your playoff hopes because all you got to do is win, place 1, 2, 3, or 4 in district. So, I think that was the case for Sauk. They're always going to play a tough non-district schedule. And I think one of the crazy things for me is that William Little, the quarterback for Sauk, he wasn't their quarterback in the regular season. He started being their starter in the playoffs, and he had a great game. I mean, you think all season Sauk was like a run first team, and they just aired it out. And that speed for the receivers was one of the differences in that game. So, moving on to Friday or Saturday morning, it's time to wrap everything up for UIL State, Aledo, and College Station. Aledo back on task, back to dominating per usual. I think College Station getting there was kind of a somewhat of a Cinderella story. New excuse me, new head coach, losing Marquise Collins in the preseason. I mean, all those things to even get back there. That's just a sign of a good team right there. But then, of course, they come up just short with a Lido team that, I mean, and I think me and you talked about last week. We thought whoever was coming out of that Longview Lido game was going to end up winning state, and that's what happened there. What are your thoughts on this game, Jackson?
Yeah, they talked about it on the broadcast that those Aledo kids remember the last time they played College Station in that state championship game, and they lost in 2017. And those kids were only in junior high, but they were crying about it just as much as the kids on the field. So getting a little bit of a revenge for that 2017 team. I think College Station was they just were really outplayed, and Aledo proved their dominance after we had talked about they lost the Parish Episcopal at the beginning of the year, but like you just said, I mean, losing games in the regular season doesn't matter as long as you're winning in a district, and when it counts on the playoffs, that's all that matters. And Lido did their thing, and it was a very dominant, very impressive win for that team, and I really like how their quarterback plays.
Yeah, I mean, just a very good game overall. Then we move to our first of the two 6A games to really close things out. Vandergrift taking on DeSoto. DeSoto wins 42-17. And, I mean, that game, Vandergrift first time state championship, DeSoto first time back since 2016. What are your thoughts on this game? I mean, I thought it was a great game overall. I think the playmakers for DeSoto showed up. I mean, Trey Wisner made plays. DeAndre Ryden made plays. Who my friend John Tay Cook. Every playmaker on DeSoto, I feel like I made a play in that one. And for Vandergrift, it was kind of one of those things where they had, they turned the ball over unnecessary times. There was that one where Braden Buchanan looked like he was trying to get rid of it because he was about to be sacked, and it ended up being a fumble instead. And so, DeSoto got the ball deep in Viper territory, so they set themselves back, and they would get the run going at times, but then DeSoto would shore up and stop the run. So what's your take on this game?
Yeah, coming into it, once we after last week and seeing who was going to make it, I picked DeSoto for sure, just based off the pure athlete standpoint. I mean, they've got playmakers all over the field for them. You saw Jonte Cook make a big play in the game. You saw both running backs, Wisner and Ryden, correct, on the last name.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Are you talking about
You
for
saw both.
Vandegrift?
Yeah, no, 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 for
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Ryden, yeah,
DeSoto.
yeah.
So you saw both of them make huge plays, and I mean, they just they just were more explosive, and they had more athletes. And that Vandegrift team fought in there. They were, I believe, it was close. It wasn't necessarily super close, but it was closer in this first half. And then you just saw DeSoto kind of run away with it, and DeSoto wanted to make a statement that they're back. You know, everyone has kind of looked down on them when it's come to the past couple of years, especially in the playoffs. So I think they wanted to make a statement, and they definitely did that this year with I believe, new head coach.
Well, it was. I think he's been in there for a few years. So, but I mean, you're completely right. It was 21-10 at halftime. Vandergrift got the ball to start the second half, and they even scored. It was 21-17, and then from there, I mean, DeSoto just turned on. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if they punted in the second half. Let's see. Did they punt in the second half? Did not. Um, yeah, I don't believe they punted until late in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, DeSoto just couldn't be stopped in the second half. I mean, 21-17, as close as you're going to get. I mean, that's a ball game right there into the third quarter with, I don't know how much, didn't say how much time was left there. So, but at the end of the day, congrats to DeSoto. And that makes 2 for 2 for them right there in that little triangle, if you will, in the DFW area that they talked about so much. And then we head to the last game, part 4 of this saga, if you will. North Shore, Duncanville. North Shore coming in 3-0 in those previous 3 meetings. And again, all 3 had different stories, right? You had the Hail Mary game 1. You had the injury to the quarterback in the semifinal for Duncanville game 2. Really just put them kind of out of pace there. And last year was that back and forth game that saw Caleb Bailey with that pass to Amendor late in the fourth to help seal that win. And they come into this one, and you felt at first, you start watching, you're like, oh man, this one's going to be all Duncanville because they get up early, 14-0, and then North Shore scores 21 in the second quarter. This one goes 21-21 into the halftime. Duncanville scores in the third quarter, and North Shore's held out. I mean, they're blanked in the second half, and of course it comes down to a fourth and I think it was 4, I believe it was. Let's see. Let me here. I have the breakdown here. Let's see. What was it? It was 4th and 4, and he gets three, basically all but 1 inch is what he gets. And then Duncanville is able to kneel it out from there. Jackson, I mean, talk to me about this game. You had to be exhausted. If you get to watch it, were you exhausted afterwards as I was?
Yeah, I got to watch it. It was I was watching it, and then about with like 2 minutes left, I drove home real quick from my grandparents' house. Was able to watch the rest of the game, and that kind of the final drive. And that last series, you saw Duncanville go up, and then North Shore got the ball, and it was kind of crazy watching that drive handle out, because it was like, oh, Duncanville's already cheering, they're already ready, and then it was like, oh, first down. Oh, we're down in Duncanville territory now. And it was super crazy to watch how that game played out. And then, David Omdor had been the superhero for that North Shore team all year, and he came up just a yard short on that first down. Kid left it all out in the field, but very deserving win for Duncanville and Coach Samples as he gets his first state championship. That community loves that coach, and Southside Dallas loves Coach Samples. So very big win for Duncanville. I'm very happy for him, Coach Samples, and the Panthers.
Yeah, and I think in that one too. I mean, it was one of those things we talked about. Duncanville was going to have the speed to deal with North Shore, and they did, right? I mean, you look at what it really showed, how much they did miss Caleb Bailey, right? I mean, you look at that last drive, and it was funny because I was saying to myself, just contain the edge. Don't let him get to the edge. Don't let Amador run on the. And that's what he did a lot in that last drive. He would roll out to the left, roll out to the right, and start running, and no one could really catch him for the most part. Got some face masks that helped him out along the way. It was interesting on that last play where the edge seemed to work so much, and then on that last play they ran up the middle, and he really was just short. I mean, his elbow hits once. If he's able to keep his elbow up for one more inch, he picks up that first down. Then who knows what happens? But really great job, especially I think by Simmons. I mean, he was the difference up until that last drive in that second half of really just containing Amador. I mean, every time in that second half, it really felt like North Shore's trying to get somewhere. He was in the backfield almost immediately. I mean, what a huge game for him to get to do that. And then hey, this was funny, by the way, with high school and college football for that matter, is that a lot of teams they'll go out of the gun and they'll go solely out of the gun, right? And so when you need times maybe to go under center, you just don't do it. It's because when Duncanville got that ball back after that last series, all I had to do is kneel it down. On first down, he takes that snap out of shotgun and just kneels down immediately instead of running forward for a couple yards and then kneeling down. All of a sudden, it's second goal at the 2. You're like, oh man, this is going to be interesting. Is he going to be able to not? Is he going to be able to get out of the end zone before kneeling it down? He does, and it's a game. But man, you're like, oh, is something going to happen here? But man, I was this is why it's important to take snaps out of center and out of shotgun for times like that, because you could tell pinning them deep like that was not, or me starting so deep, I should say, not pinning them, but starting so deep almost came back to bite them in the butt there. But great game to end state on. Those two teams, they always put on a great showing. Final thoughts on the season as a whole, Jackson, as we get out of here today.
Yeah, I think as a whole, we got to see a ton of great matchups across the board, whether it was during the regular season, whether it was during the playoff state. Overall, it was a blast getting to go cover games this year, and congratulations to all the state champions. You all played a heck of a season this year, and looking forward to seeing who's building this off season and who's going to be ready when it comes next fall for another season.
Yeah, the stories are already starting for sure. We'll be here to cover it all. We'll be back tomorrow with a VYPE Recruit Spotlight. We're gonna be going live, I think around 11 o'clock or so, to talk about some of these signing days, see where some of these Texas athletes are signing to. There's lots of lots of still unknowns about who's going where. So me and Jackson will have that all for you. But until then, this is the last episode of Locker Talk for 2022. We'll bring it back in 2023, talk some basketball, baseball, soccer, all those sports that are happening in 2023. So, hey, it's been fun in 2022 covering football, Jackson. I know me and you on at least, usually once a week if we could, covering and breaking it all down. And now we have our state champions, and we get to go out of here with a bang. Hopefully, you're having a good Christmas, Jackson. Hopefully, there's going to be some good Christmas for you. So, last time for the 2022 season on Locker Talk Live, who are you shouting out today?
Yeah, I'm going to shout out all the like I said before, all the teams that won. I'm going to shout out you, Josh. You do a great job setting up the shows, getting us going, and I hope you have a great Christmas yourself. Also, going to just shout out my family. It's that time of year where my brother's coming in town from college. Though we might not get along necessarily all the time, it's always a fun time being around the family and spending that time together. So shout out my family. And yeah, just shout out to you again, Josh.
Yeah, and shout out to you as well, my co-host there. Been great covering the season with you, and shout out to all of my family and my wife. If you're watching, and then shout out to the VYPE crew. Did some great things this season, and hopefully we'll continue that on into 2023. So with that being said, for the last time for 2022 for Locker Talk Live, anyways, like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. I'm Whack, and that's Jackson, and we'll see you at the games.